So hey everyone, as always, welcome to the channel and thanks for stopping by. My name is Rich and I'm the channel host, and today we're going to be talking about building your own drone business, and specifically a recent contract that I started. I'm going to walk you through exactly what it is I'm doing. So this is going to be a longer video. We're not going to get into details of the flight. We're going to give you the overview of working on a larger construction project. So this is a drone progression report. And so this one's going to go a little longer because we're going to talk about acquiring the client and then the initial things we did, and then finally setting up for regular flights to show off the progress of this construction site. So stay tuned. This is going to be a long one like I warned, but hopefully it'll be some valuable information for you. All right, everybody, and welcome back. So quick little clip, flight over the construction site, and now here we are. So I've been getting a lot of questions lately through YouTube and actually through azdrone.net. Thanks for getting in touch, by the way. And a lot of folks want to know, so what's the process? What do you do when you're getting one of these drone progression reports? Number one biggest question that I get asked is, how'd you get the job? So on one of my more recent clients' locations, which we just landed last month, I actually got a call from azdrone.net. So I do have a web presence, and I do spend a lot of time doing search engine optimization so that I can get found. This particular construction group was calling from Phoenix, Arizona. That's where the management group is. But the construction progression report that they were looking for happened to be in Prescott, Arizona. So I got a phone call from one of the folks who works for the company. They wanted to know what the price of a drone progression video would be. And as I started talking with this potential client, it became clear to me very quickly that they didn't really know everything they wanted. And as a matter of fact, through our discussions, I found out this is the first time they're doing drone progression reporting on a new build that they're working on. So this is an experiment for them. They want to see if this adds value for their investors, be it venture capitalists or investment banks, and they want to be able to pass along the progress on a monthly basis. So as I started talking to the customer, job number one, listen to the client. They weren't quite certain everything they wanted, and with that in mind, I actually gave them some suggestions and some ideas based on my prior work. So I was guiding them into this as, this is their first try at it, and they were looking for some pricing. So number one, I had to write up some information about what we could do for them, doing progression video, progression stills, progressions with orthomosaics, 360 panoramics, you name it. I listed out the items and the options that they had available to them and packaged it up into an easy to read package that they could go over with the folks who weren't on the phone call. So after I got the call, I also made sure to ask where the location was and do a little checking before I responded to them to make sure that I could fly in the area, that I didn't have any airspace problems. So after I got the phone call, I sat down and went to work. I got the address of the location. I found out where it was in relation to where I am. And I started looking at the Google Maps and at the Litchi Mission Hub, and I made a decision. I said, you know what, I'm going to go over and just take a look at this job site. The person who had called wasn't in a major rush. She did say that they needed something in the next couple of days that they were going to be making some decisions based on. And so I figured I'd take the opportunity to do a little upfront work and check out the construction site. By the way, I also got the construction supervisor's name. So when I went onto the job site, I introduced myself to him just to make sure that he knew that I was on location and taking a look on behalf of his company. So he was happy to see me and let me do my thing. So once I found out that, hey, there's no airspace issues, and then I drove out to take a look at the site, I made some decisions that I was going to have to spend a little time on the site up front without even getting paid. Now, why would you do that? quite simple. It's a unique construction site. There's a lot of other stuff going on around it, a lot of homes, hotels, and businesses. So I wanted to get an idea of the location and what would go into it for me before I quoted a final price. So I took a drive out to the location, and we're looking at Litchi Mission Hub over here. And on the Litchi Mission Hub, I made up a quick potential flight for myself with the Litchi app, just for an initial flight to get a look around. And also, when I went to the construction site, I looked for obstructions, power lines, trees that could be in the way, things that don't necessarily show up on the Google Maps or on the Litchi Mission Hub. So as you're seeing on here, it's a pretty blank slate. It was some open land. It's no longer open land. It's got a lot of buildings on it now. But so my first trip was an unpaid trip to take a look at the location. And then I actually went back. Since I had permission to be on the site, I decided to take some time and do some possible layouts for how I was going to approach this project. So it's not just a sit down on the computer and jam out something in Litchi with a flight path. Normally, you're going to need to see the location. So while you give yourself an initial idea in the office when you're first doing research, it always pays to put boots on the ground and do a little additional research. So once I sent my list to the clients, I did hear back from them that it was a go-ahead. So we set up a contract for the next 6 to 8 months, and we're going to be doing a monthly progression here. And I think they're going to discover that monthly is too far apart given how quickly they're doing the construction. So the next step I took was on July 20th, I actually returned to the location and I started plotting out my flights. So the flight path that I've showed you here on the Litchi Mission Hub, this was just me, spitballing for myself. But what I did on the 20th is I went out and I actually flew the location. I flew my drone and I recorded waypoints along the way. So I'm just going to go back down here to my missions. I'm going to do an open and I'm going to do the large orbital here. So I started actually setting up missions on the location. So I picked a Saturday knowing that there wouldn't be construction personnel on location, so that I didn't have any concerns about flying over people or interfering with people's jobs. So I actually launched the drone, flew it to each of the waypoints, made a waypoint. So I actually flew it along the property and created waypoints with my Mavic 2 Pro's controller. So I have my C1 and C2 keys bound on the bottom of that controller for dropping waypoints and dropping points of interest. And so with that, I could actually fly over the location, get the angles I liked, and then record that waypoint and move on to the next waypoint. And I set the mission up so that I've got a slower speed. I think I set it up to about 8 miles per hour. And just because I really wanted to capture everything, if it moves a little slow, you can always speed up the video afterward. And that's actually what I did with the first set. So I made this orbital, I made this flight path around the location, setting up for a video flight. After I set up for that video flight, I set up for some still images as well. So those still images, here we go. This is actually an incredibly simple flight path. Once again, I was using the Litchi app, my iPhone, and my Mavic 2 Pro controller. And I was using the C1 and C2 keys and setting up my shots where I liked them. And afterward, I can repeat these shots over and over again. So the next time that I go to the location, I can actually just repeat the actions that I did previously. So like I said, first visit, there is a lot of upfront work. You're doing that upfront work to make it easier on yourself later, and also to make flight paths that are repeatable. So there you go. There were several other missions that I set up. Some are throwaway missions. Some are not throwaway missions. One other one that actually worked out nicely was I had the drone do a flight up through the center of the structures, showing off the overall progression of the entire site from a person's point of view. So I will be redoing this one again and including it in the video. So we've got still photos, we've got several still videos, and let's take a look in here. We had our initial ones. We had that Clark Wayland or Clark Middle, and then we have another one called Clark Down, where we're actually shooting straight down at the ground, covering the entire area, flying over all of the different components, all of the different buildings. So in total, I made over 5 Litchi missions while I was on location, which allowed me to pick from those missions when I returned to the office for the first round of editing. So I'll actually only be flying 3 of those 5 missions for the final progression. The other 2 are just going to be throwaways, and I can use them for additional images if I want to. After all of this got set up, I still wasn't done. My next step, I made a decision to use Map Pilot by Maps Made Easy to actually do an orthomosaic of the location as well, because I feel like orthomosaics can tell a really great story, a 2-dimensional model where you shoot down at a raw location. A few weeks later, you shoot down at the concrete pads. Maybe a few days after that, you're actually shooting at the construction progressing. It's incredible how quickly these things go. So in total, we have video for the client. We have still photography for the client. We have orthomosaic models for the client that are comparable, just like the images in the videos are comparable. So the big part of this up front is doing that extra bit of work to create those repeatable flight paths. So you're not going to do this from the office. You can plan things out from the office, give yourself a good idea, but until you're on location, you don't know how things are going to work out. You need to get that view and pick the perspectives that are going to be interesting to your clients, the things that really show off their growth and expansion. So the next time you get one of these phone calls where someone is looking for a price quote, my gut instinct to tell you is don't give them a price quote right away, because you don't know all of the issues for this site. Number one, is it an airspace that you can fly in? If it's in controlled airspace, can you get approval through Lance using Kitty Hawk or AirMap? You need to check that part out. Once you've determined that this is an area that you can fly, checking the area out for obstructions, for things that might get in your way, for telephone poles and power lines, or any other types of things that could get in the way of your flights, you need to assess that. As you can see on the Litchi thing, there also are some houses really, really close to the construction site. Those poor people are probably having a headache with all the construction going on, and you want to make sure that you're being a good neighbor and not interfering with them when you're flying your drone. You don't want to make them feel like there's a privacy invasion or anything going on. So that was another thing that went into my decision-making process as I put these flight paths together. How can I show the clients what they need to see while also being non-intrusive to the neighboring houses who are built up on a very beautiful view area? So once again, it was a Mavic 2 Pro that I'm using for this. It's the Litchi application, and I'm using Map Pilot for doing the ortho. This time around, I decided not to use Ground Station Pro, and we all know I love Ground Station Pro, but I really didn't feel like lugging the iPad around. And with Map Pilot by Maps Made Easy, this was an easy enough site to lay out because it was such a small footprint. So it's not acres and acres and acres. You know, this is well under 10 acres, not like some of my other projects. So I felt very comfortable using Litchi and Map Pilot to plot out the ortho and all of the flight paths. Now, I want to say one more thing before we get off of this one, and, you know, still trying to keep time in mind here. So I recently received another inquiry from a potential client. It was a commercial real estate sales office, and they were looking to have a medical office flown, and they needed it right now, right now, right now. So I got the address from them, and I popped on over to Kitty Hawk really quick, plugged the address in, and I had a sneaking suspicion when they contacted me, and sure enough, the address that they were asking for was under 1,000 feet away from the Yavapai Regional Medical Center that happens to have a helipad, and they do the life flights. So the location that they were wanting shot was in fact 0 AGL. So it was one of the red boxes that you might see if you're using Kitty Hawk. It was a no-go. Now, there are ways to put in requests to actually fly in a 0 AGL area. Other people have done videos about that, and they've showed how you can actually put in the request through Kitty Hawk and put in a request for maybe 50 or 100. But in the case of this one, I took a pass on the job because they needed something flown. They were contacting me on a Thursday and they needed it flown on Monday. There's no way that I'm getting permission in that little amount of time, especially when it's in a 0 AGL area, directly across from where helicopters launch and land, where they're doing emergency services. My level of comfort flying within 1,000 feet of a helipad is not really high. So when you get that phone call, like talking about this whole build out here, when you get that phone call from a potential customer, take your time. I know if you're building your business that you're really in a hurry to get people under your wing, that you want new clients and you want as many new clients as possible. You got to do your due diligence beforehand, because you don't want to end up flying somewhere or committing to something that you're unable to provide. So that example with the recent phone call, it's something that I couldn't provide for them. I did let the customer know. I said, in the time frame that you want this done, unfortunately, it's 0 AGL. I am also a terrestrial photographer. I've done a lot of buildings, landscapes, portraits, and so I could shoot the exterior for you from the terrestrial standpoint. Unfortunately, they were really set on drones. I don't know if they got someone else to do it, but I do have a concern about that, because oftentimes you'll see people doing that, and that's not up to me to police or anything, but I hope they do the right thing. So make sure you ask questions. Make sure that when you're talking to the client, you're really listening to hear if they're understanding everything it is they want. It's one of your jobs. It's not to upsell them, but one of your jobs is to educate them as to what is possible, especially if they're going to be presenting this to investors. You really want to put a production together that sticks in the investors' minds that they have made the appropriate investment working with this construction group on this new housing project. So keep in mind in the conversations, look for those little trigger words where maybe it doesn't sound like the client knows everything that's possible, and go ahead and be helpful and fill them in. Don't feel like you're giving away information where they can price shop you. You really need to put your best foot forward, especially if you're trying to build your client base. Well, I hope this video was useful, gave you a couple of ideas, and it's not as long as I thought it was going to be, so that's great. We're keeping it sub 20 minutes. But if you have any questions or comments, please make sure to leave them below in this video. Please make sure to like and subscribe. And in the near future, I'll be taking you along for another capture session for this particular construction site. So look forward to that. I think I'm going to be flying that one on the 24th, but I'll have to double check my calendar. All right, everyone, have an awesome day, fly safe, and have a great start to your week. We'll see you again next week.